Hey there, mamas. So I think this is going to be called second half of Cloth Diaper Sewing Month. So welcome back to Cloth Diaper Sewing Month, and the second half is going to mostly be pull. Polyurethane laminated polyester knit. It's what's used as the waterproof layer of most modern cloth diapers. I'm going to be doing a rear edge pocket diaper, really basic, just the hole in the middle of the back, elastic on the pull but not on the inner. I've got microfleece here. You can use microfleece, you can use Alova suede cloth, you can use wicking peak. Each of those has sort of a better and worse thing about them. Microfleece is kind of middle of the road. It's not as stretchy and difficult to sew with as wicking peak, but it is stretchier and harder to sew with than Alova, but it doesn't get as bad of buildup as Alova. Fewer babies are sensitive to it. It's a little thicker, not as trim, and not as stay dry as the wicking peak. Each of those has kind of their own benefits and their own, downfalls. I'm just going to be using my extra small square tab pattern for this because I'm doing a newborn stash. So this is just cut. I used the pocket all-in-one /sized square tabs template here, and I've got them both cut. I've added about double the seam allowance for cutting to the back of the pull, and a little bit less than double for the fleece. That's because we're going to be doing a folded in elastic casing at the back. And because we're doing the hole at the back instead of the front, we are going to be sewing around from the back and leaving the front closed and then turning through our rear elastic casing area. Before I do any of that, I'm going to be prepping my pull layer, just like when you're doing an all-in-one, you prep the inner layer. For something like this, you put snaps or appliques, which is hook and loop or Velcro, on the front. I have my loop strip cut to my template here. It's the same size if you notice. Right in there. I'm going to be doing this as a Velcro diaper. And then I've got it backed with another layer of pull so that it's more durable there, and it can be facing in or out. It doesn't matter. This is just an easier way for me to show you. I've made sure to leave the sewing seam allowance there open. And then you're just going to mark that either on this side or that side and sew that on first, and then sew around. You could also glue this down too to make it even easier for yourself. I like to glue things down with washable glue stick. It really, really makes the whole process a lot easier. I hate sewing with pull, and it makes sewing with pull a lot easier. And you would obviously not be working with black thread on white hook and loop, but I'm doing that so that you can see my little line around the outside there. I often go and round my corners a little bit. When you're working with pull, you want to use a Microtech Sharp small gauge or a ballpoint needle to make smaller, cleaner holes through the pull, because the more holes through pull, the less waterproof it is. You also, when you're cutting your pull, you want to have the stretch going wing to wing, this direction. And the same with your microfleece. So when you're working with pretty much any fabric for diapers, you want hip to hip, the direction of the stretch, not front to back. And that's important when cutting your fabrics. At this point, you can set your layers together, depending on how you're going to be sewing your pocket, just like any other diaper. And this is another place with pull, or especially a stretchy inner, where I like to use the washable glue stick again. It really helps. This is a really, really stretchy microfleece. There's some that's not as stretchy as others, but this one is really stretchy and really thin. You put the outer face, which is the fuzzy side, the pilled side, you want to put that toward the outer face of your pull. And you want to line it up the best you can. And then I like to go and just dab glue stick around the outside. And you can prep a few diapers at a time and then wait for it to dry so it's not sticky on your needles. You won't be going in it too much, and if you don't use too much, it won't be too sticky. But I like to just take the washable school glue stick, this kind that starts purple and fades. And I just go and sort of dab a couple spots around the outside. And just on the very edge. Honestly, you might even sew inside that edge, because I put it right on the very edge. And I just kind of dab it down in a couple spots. And this is an unnecessary step. You can use clips. If you're using a lova, you don't need to do this at all. You can just use clips, because a lova doesn't stretch enough to be an issue. But when I work with wicking peak, when I work with microflace, especially if I'm not practiced, I like to do this. When I was doing this all the time, I didn't need to do this step. But I am not practiced with pull. I haven't sewn with pull in a very long time. And I don't like sewing with pull. I don't think anybody does. But it's one of those things that you definitely get better with as you get more practice. So then after I finish doing the glue, I'm going to set it aside, and then I will come back after dinner and I will sew the rest. We're just going to start just right where we've had our little line cut longer here, right where we have the area cut longer. We're going to start right up against that cut area. And I use my foot as my guide, and I just rest it against the edge. So there's one little trick I do at this point that helps get the even wings. And if you can see, my lines aren't perfectly straight. My width from one side to the other is not exactly even. At this point, if you want to try to line up your corners, especially on a square tab, and make sure that your seams actually make for the same size of tabs, I often am just a little bit off, and that's really apparent on a square tab diaper. So you'll see that this one is further in than this one. And what I'm going to do is just sew this one a little bit tighter in to even them out. And it'll make a big difference when you turn it. So I'm just going to drop my stitch a tiny bit further inside. So I've got that extra little seam there that should make it a lot more similar to the other side. Yep, much better. So now that you've got them fairly similar, you can trim around your edges. Since I made mine a little bit too far in here. You can round your corners a little bit, make it easier to turn. If it's a round tab pattern, you don't need to worry about it as carefully. And then that's now your turning hole. So now you just take it and you turn it right side in. And when you're feeding your elastics on a pull diaper, you want to feed the elastics after your casings are done. You want to feed it on the top side. You want to have all this other stuff below it. So you have the thinner side above the elastic and the thicker side below, and that gives a little more waterproofing. Plus, when you're sewing your casings, you can pull your inside in just a tiny bit. So like when you're doing your casings, or if you were doing a ruffled fitted, you would just hold it in just a tiny bit so your pull is out just a little beyond your fleece or your alova. I don't know if you can see that. Just a little tiny bit, like 2 millimeters or 1/16 of an inch, something like that. And you can just do that all the way along on the inside. That tiny bit of difference won't make a big difference on the inside, but it'll help a lot with wicking. Now you've got it all turned, and before you do your elastics, you can do your back elastic little fold area to make your casing for your back elastic, or you can do it after you've sewn your side channels. I'm going to do my side channels first and then the back, but there's not a reason for doing either or. I'm just trying to get it out of the way. A lot of people like sewing with the pull up for this part, but if you're using a stretchy fabric, it's easier. But if, like I said, if you want to be watching to make sure that your pull is just a tiny bit outside your fleece or whatever you're using, then it's easier to do that if you're sewing on the inside. And I'm going to be using black thread, so it's a little easier to see what I'm doing. So now we've got our side casing sewn, and we're gonna now do our little back casing. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take the back, it's a little beyond the end here, and I'm just gonna fold it in on itself. And just kind of ignore the white part, you know, ignore the inside. And you can have some extra pull going in if it's too big of a flap. You can trim that off when you're done. And you're just gonna sew it however wide you want your elastic casing to be, but so that the top here still lines up. And there's your elastic casing for the back. See? And then you can also, at this point, sew down your front. I like to sew it down a little bit more than the elastic just to make sure it's easy for people to tuck. When we do our top stitching, we're going to close up this little edge here, so you don't need to worry about that part being clean. So now you just feed your elastics like usual. And I'm pushing it up toward the top, toward the pull, so that it's above the little turn edge there. I also like to rotate it so that it's this direction and that it helps it grab. It helps make sure that it's above it and not below it. And then you lay your elastic flat. See, it's nice and flat and it's above the edge there. So if you can see it against the white there, you've got a little bit of your pull sticking out beyond your fleece. And then you're just gonna pull it until it's nice and tight, but still has full stretch. So it's still easy to pull it all the way out. Like that. And then we'll use this first side to measure against the second side. And I know it doesn't look pretty with the black thread, but that's so that it's easier for you to see. So there's both of your equal length elastic casings, see, on the sides. And you notice this is a newborn pattern, but it's very wide through the crotch, and that's important to be able to fit in your inserts and have enough absorbency. Now we're going to take and do our back elastic. We've got the casings open on the sides. Now you've got your back elastic threaded. And like I said, you can trim down this or just leave it, it doesn't matter. A lot of people also will put their tag, if they have a business tag. Before you sew that elastic casing, you can tuck in your business tag there and use that elastic casing seam to sew in your business tag, and then you would have a little rear tag inside your diaper. And for the back, I don't make it as tight as I do the sides, just a little bit of a gather, not a lot. So we have our elasticized back, we have our elastics on the sides, and the next thing we're going to do is our top stitching, and that's just to make it lay flat and make everything lined up. And at this point you can make sure that your fleece isn't out, out further than your pull at any one place, or any place that's at least important, like through the legs. You can also just make it look nicer by having it lay flat. For pull diapers, I like to do the top stitching fairly close to the edge, and that makes it less likely to leak. Because the majority of for a pocket diaper, you're going to have your insert in the middle, so you want to keep your stitches as far outside as possible. So there's your nice flat front that's been top stitched. You can go in and you can round your Velcro corners at any point if you're doing Velcro. The distance here is specifically this distance because of if you had snaps, it would still fit your sewing foot. That's why the snaps are located where they are. If your snaps aren't fitting with your normal standard sewing foot, then I suggest taking a look at how much seam allowance you're leaving. You might need to have it a little closer, or you might need to just make your cut a little wider and give yourself a little bit bigger of a cut when you're cutting your fabric. So now you're going to do the same thing, and you're going to top stitch around the back. And then when I get to the middle here, to where my pockets split, I'm gonna have them overlaid. Clip them right there. And at this point, you're gonna top stitch right up to your elastic, which makes it then close up that hole that was a little beyond that. And you can see how it is closed up with the top stitching right there. It's a little hard to see. Maybe on the inside it's a little easier. See. You could even go up and down a little bit there and just really close it up. It's a good idea. I never thought about that before. Let's do that. Less stress on the pocket. So I've top stitched both wings. And at this point, if you were doing a snapping pocket, all you would need to do is add the wing snaps and you would be done. But since I'm going to be doing a Velcro pocket, I have to do my laundry tabs. And since this pocket's not going to have any sort of insert in the wings, I just do it after it's sewn. Some people just sew it to their inner fabric and have it just attached to their inner before they prep everything else. But I put it all the way through because I don't put absorbency in the wings. And then for my little Velcro closures, what I do is I take the one of the hook and the one of the loop and I put them back to back. And then I sew them around about 2/3 of the way before sewing it then onto the diaper. So I'll start off and I use a straight stitch. And sometimes I go very slowly with my hand, depending on if it's catching, but I use a fairly wide straight stitch. And obviously if it was in white, it would look nicer. And I just set it inside. I do the loop up if possible, but there's definitely times when you can't, when you have to do hook up and then you just go really slowly. And I just hand guide it around the outside for those 2/3 of the way around. So then at this point, where it's about 2/3 of the way around, I would slide it with the hook side in and the loop side out onto my wing. I just kind of work it up in there. And I just center it. It's nice and centered there. And then I just work it the rest of the way around. There's one nice even tab. And then you just take your laundry tab and set it inside of that. I like to set it so that it's, you know, nice and centered and has about, what is that, like 4 millimeters or, I don't know, 1/4 inch away from the laundry tab. And then I just sew it down. And if you were wanting it to look really pretty, obviously I'm doing it so you can see it with the black, but you could have white thread on the inside and then a blue thread on the outside. You could have it matching your pull and have the top stitching barely show at all. So there's the one side. I like to smooth out my edges a little bit, especially since this part does touch the baby's skin while they're wearing it. But it's just the loop, so it's not too scratchy, but sometimes these corners can be kind of sharp. And there you've got your laundry tab, and that works by before you put it in the wash, you just close it down on itself and make sure that it's really well pressed so that none of those hooks can grab your other diapers or your inserts. Now you've got your finished pocket diaper with your leading edge pocket. There's a lot of things you can do to modify this. This is just kind of a very basic pattern, but a lot of people do things like put a little strip of pull at the front to make it wick reducing at the front. You know, people do it either by having the pull fold over or by having a separate strip attached to your inner. That would all be part of your inner prep process. Your little laundry tabs there, since this is a Velcro version. If you were gonna stuff it, I've got 2 really thin little newborn size inserts here. You would grab them together, put your hands on the side, insert it inside to the end, and then take your hand out and spread your hand out to flatten the insert. And then you can easily get it to fill that whole width of the crotch, and it kind of curves the diaper in. You get the nice little pocket with the elastic. Also pulls in one of the wicking because you've got your pull out a little beyond your inner. And pull your butt up over the back. When you're putting it on the baby, you want to make sure that this inner is tucked inside. You just want to make sure that the pull is out beyond the inner material, and then you just wrap it around their belly. This one has an umbilical notch at the front. It's lower in the front for a newborn. And then you close it. And there's your super basic leading edge rear pocket diaper. Happy sewing!